put together yourself, he always comes in and stops it. Or he sends the agents in and they break this stuff up. Even when you doggone congregate the wrong way. You see what I'm saying? You can't fraternize with certain people. The point I'm trying to make here is, this is a form of government mind control, and the thing about it is, we must ask ourselves this particular question. This is critical shit. We'll get into some other stuff, but we got to ask ourselves this. I believe now that in this breeding process, the end result of what is walking around what we call black people, they don't think at all. I think there's only 1 out of 10
Probably worse than
that analyze. 1 out of 10. It might be worse than that. I'm giving the benefit of the doubt. You see, when they released the bell curve in 1990, we got all upset. Because we was thinking that they was talking about based on us achieving academically. Well, naturally, we can go to college and do that rote learning shit. That ain't nothing but memorization. Cram for a test, delete your files, and move to the next goddamn chapter. That's nothing. They were not talking about that. They were talking about a people that they had bred. It was going to be a futuristic people that will be non-analytical and no brain function whatsoever. And we are seeing the results of it now, 10 years later. Well, we're saying that in actuality, we got to analyze whether we think at all. Whether this thing is a form of heightened emotion, response, and reaction. And these 3 things together, we call thought, but it's not. Because we never do think. We never do think. How can Denzel Washington be so brilliant that he can transform himself into any type of person he wants? He can't analyze it. This is wrong, man. Is this what it's about? You see what I'm saying? This is the science that's going down, whereas in actuality what we got is drones. Worker bees, drones. But one thing about the bees, in any kind of swarm, when the swarm comes together, it makes a collective consciousness. It might be stupid by its damn self, but when it comes together, it makes a collective consciousness and a whole intelligentsia in the swarm. Killer bees. By itself, you should play with it, give it to your daughter. Put it in a little thing, but get 100 of them, and your daughter better be out there be running. So we don't even do that, because obviously it's going to be thousands of people congregating, like TD Jakes and all these foolishness, and we're talking about literally drones, useless eaters. Obsolete farm machinery. This is the white boy calls us. The point I'm trying to make here is, this is some amazing stuff we're talking about here. That we talking about people that don't even think. You see. And this is some stuff that's going to... Now, let me show you another thing also, too. Cause do you know that there's the meeting that Honorable Elijah Muhammad had with Martin Luther King, and he made Martin Luther King bear witness that the white man was the devil. Martin Luther King said, yeah, I know. Shit. Do you know that he told Martin Luther King, he said, brother, bring your wife and your children to Chicago and we can make a safe haven for them. He said, if you leave out of this house today, I'll never see you again. And for what Martin Luther King said, I know. Because we pretty much know that based on the last I Had a Dream speech that he knew his time was up. Because they don't ever really tell you the doggone, not I Had a Dream speech, the mountaintop speech, but if you ever heard that tape, that shit sound more like Malcolm X. He started talking, damn near he was talking about the Illuminati and the world powers of be in 1968. He said, I'm letting it all out because I know that they're going to hit me. As well as, did you see the stuff on the new research with Coakley is done on Jesse Jackson? You know, Jesse Jackson was a part of that whole 9 yards. The sellout and the plant thing. It's interesting because the brother that I told you that I used to hang out with in the early 80s, this brother brother, he goes all over the world with Jesse Jackson. And I put 2 and 2 together, this brother's a government agent. Because it's interesting about him, he just up and, he got a security guard job, but yet he up and went to South Africa for 6 weeks this year. And that's real interesting because a lot of the agents, they end up going over to South Africa. Very key. You see what I'm saying? It's very key. So now it's going on. I met a brother that used to be married to one of my homegirls back in the 80s and in the early 90s. And I saw the brother for the first time in about 2 years, and I said, damn, man, yeah, I ain't seen you in about 2 years. He said, I literally moved out of town. I'm just not coming back. He said, I'm married to a psychologist that has a PhD in psychiatry or whatever. And he said that she used to be married to a skull and bones, which is, you know, to the whole skull and bones thing. I said, damn, that's interesting. I said, it's a black woman. I said, that's interesting. And he said the skull and bone people threw her in the mental institution. And only because she was into the psychiatry field, had a PhD in it, they couldn't get on anything based on saying she was crazy because she said all the right things and they released her. And I said, well, in actuality, whoever her husband was, they was quite nice to her because they were supposed to kill her if something went wrong where they had to put her in the mental institution. And I said, well, what was the deal? He said, well, the deal was that they only got with her because they wanted her mulatto kids. So in so many words, they can have their wife, regular white wife, but to ensure their survival into the future, they got these black wives or concubines or whatever the deal is, and they have black children, and then they take the children as a form of an offspring just in case their hybrid offspring don't make it, which is the white thing. They got to ensure themselves that the original people be here, and somehow that's their way of saying that puts them into the future. So this is real big that's going on. They even had an A&E special that was showing the doggone skull and bones, and they was inducting black women in this thing. Which means now that this is the new thing that is supposed to be going on. It's supposed to be going on in the country when it comes to Hollywood. Now, you know Hollywood, they phased a lot of the sisters out. They couldn't really get no acting jobs. The brothers barely got them in the last 10 years. But now all of a sudden, the sisters are now being able to get acting jobs. But the jobs they're getting now is they got to be opposite white boys. Like the sister Tandy Newton did Mission Impossible.
Boiler Room.
And then you got your girl Nia Long, who was in all the black flicks, couldn't get nothing else. All of a sudden, she did Boiler Room, where she's being with the white boy. Your girl, Lila Rashawn did one with Mark Wahlberg, who's a hitman. And so this is the key. And they even reactivated Lisa Bonet's career recently. She did a movie called High Fidelity, and she was the playing in this thing. Now, it was interesting based on the Mission Impossible because the thing about your girl, Tandy Newton, is she wasn't just a love interest. Like they did that with Gloria Hinder in the movie Live and Let Die. He screwed up, but you know, it was just a plane. With the first Bond flick that Roger Moore starred in '73. But, so they did that, but this was a little bit different. In this movie, it was a love interest that was on the level of a white girl. He was all in love with her. So at one time, you had to look to see whether this, you know, you just forgot whether this was a black woman laying down there. They tried to play the little Spanish thing at first, but then again, clearly, Tandy Newton was black. But then they always try to do the shit they put up in there too. They put this thing up in there to degrade. They can always degrade when they do stuff. Where her agent job was that the enemy in the movie had broke away from the agency. And she used to go with him, so her job was to go fuck her old boyfriend. You see what I'm saying? The spy. So they use that as a whole in the thing, but the point I'm trying to make here is that they're gearing up now to put these black women in the movie and say it's okay to be with the white man. Even in the movie Spawn, go back and look at the movie Spawn. there's a part where they got the little scene going on, and Spawn turned around, and his whole thing to even come back from the dead was for his black woman. But yet he turns around and he looks at the white boy and he says, she belongs to you now. So she said something like, she should be with you now, something like that. Giving the blessing. So this is a whole foot to also this mulatto child and somehow regraft himself back into something just in case something goes down and he don't remain on the damn planet. This is their way of saying we can, if anything, we can assure ourselves in the future by getting some type of black seed. We know we got it with the black man, you see what I'm saying? And we got to even look at that particular part. But then again, what about the black woman? You see what I'm saying? This is very key stuff that's actually going on. Even your boy, the intelligence man from the White House. You know, Clinton boy, that guy that come out, you know, he's a chief or whatever, he got him a black wife. You see, it's very key. Clint Eastwood married a black woman recently. About 4 or 5 years ago. This is people don't know it, but she's out in Monterey. This woman is a reporter. She's a black woman. This is certain things that just don't happen all of a sudden. You see what I'm saying? Starts happening. Starts happening. So this is a lot of stuff. Now it's interesting because going back, there was a guy that I met in Chicago when I spoke there. Moved down to Atlanta, and he was working for the sewage department. And he mentioned that when the sewage, when the shit hits the water, it turns salt. But yet they hear all this knocking all day long. Like, damn, that can't be regular feces. Because at least by the time it gets to where they are, it's got to be softened up. And he put two and two together, and it was pure body parts. It filtering in through the sewage. You see what I'm saying? Filtering in through the sewage. So, going back to this particular science, in which is setting up for the actual lecture, what we'll deal with today is, we're talking about, they predict 900,000 Africans being dead at the end of the year. Now, in any type of research, if they give you that, they always give you the conservative estimate. So if they're saying 900,000, you got to add that 9 times. And you get somewhat close to a conservative number. You see. So we're talking about by the end of 2001. And hopefully, as we say, in warfare, we don't want to even get to that thing. So we're talking about hardly no Africans being on the continent at all. You see what I'm saying? And a little bit of window dress niggas in the major cities that you have there. But remember, we're talking about a huge continent. You see what I'm saying? So we're talking about none at the, you see. Now this is interesting because 5/5/2000, that we did the lecture with, based on Richard Noon's book, which he also said, which was a big-time Mason, and he also gives it in 1978 that in actuality, 5/5/2000 is actuality a time that we're going to retake Africa. Talks about that. Now this is interesting because 5/5/2000 comes about at May 5th, 2000, and this movie is out called I Dream of Africa with Kim Basinger. Same time this book comes out, Africa in My Blood by Jane Goodall. So all of this particular stuff we're talking about here is a form of mind control to get the people's mind and get the people back in love with Africa, as well as the whole Kofi Annan thing at the UN and them raising money for Africa. Now, as Dick Gregory said, he spoke in Harlem 2 days before I did on that Wednesday of 5/5/2000. He spoke with that Wednesday, because the 5/5/2000 was that Friday. And he said that they also used that point for about 5,000 people to get to this particular space station that they built. This particular space station that they also built. About 5,000 of them to get to the space station. So we got a lot of stuff going on. Go check out the movie Gladiator. How many people saw the movie Gladiator? Because the movie is also dealing with the whole concept of death. And that particular aspect of death that we got to know, or we have to understand, that in actuality is the transformation. And in actuality, he actually became the great gladiator by hooking up with the African, and the African basically telling him the concept of death. But the whole ancient world had a whole other concept of death than we do, and didn't have the same fear that we do, and which has plagued us. And even there's a book that just put out, Through the Gates of Death, by Dion Fortune, which has a lot of books out. But why is it that her particular book on death is just being released? She's been dead for what, about 60 years, you see. Through the Gates of Death, and that whole concept of the death aspect. So go check out that particular movie. Also, I want you to check out the movie Wishmaster 1 and Wishmaster 2, because that's also dealing with the jinns, and the jinns are actually has something to do with the stone, and also we're talking about a concept of melanin. The genie in the bottle, explained in Jung psychology, unleash the genie and you get the 3 wishes, which is also talking about the mercury spirit, which is also alchemical for melanin. Get the movie Prophecy 3, which is the last and final one, where they got this angel of death coming to slay all the doggone people. And the chief person in the movie, who was against the whole thing of this civilization going on with the foolishness, he sells out because he get down here and learn how to drive and get driver's license and sell out, and the angel of death is coming to clean up shit. And he's saying, I don't want to go now because I don't learn how to drive. About like black people. 30 pieces of silver. So, there's some new stuff that's going down based on the war in America, or the war itself. These wars, these mass major wars, especially of the 20th century, was to sacrifice a whole bunch of bodies to a whole bunch of gods that is in charge of keeping this shit going. Because, you know, like I said, they got their whole realm called the demiurge. So you have a mass slaughter to sacrifice energy. We'll get into this also, too, because it's all in the Hindu text on how you do this whole thing based on this particular sacrifice. Get the movie Ben-Hur, which is literally the word Ben, which means son, and Hur, which means Horus. Son Horus, or King Horus, which is also the Christ name. And the whole movie is dealing with the whole thing based on black people versus America. You thinking it's the Roman government. He became a Roman citizen, but had enough sense not to sell his people down the tube, although he was accepted in their society. Very key movie, came about at a certain time. Right at the time, I think 1958, 1959, when they understood that it was going to be a time that they was putting black people into the whole political process, whether they're going to be on the side of the government or be on the side of their own people. And the movie is always a test pattern. Get the movie Full Eclipse, Mario Van Peebles. You ever saw that movie? Where they're talking about the whole thing based on werewolves, and they have these super cops. And they can heal their wounds overnight based on this particular serum or this elixir. All of that stuff is dealing with melanin. Dealing with melanin. Go back and get the movie Witch Hunt, the one from 1994 with Dennis Hopper. And what's the black girl, the mother on Moesha?
Cheryl Lee Ralph.
Cheryl Lee Ralph. Get that movie again where she's playing Marie Nouveau. Inspiration, dealing with this voodoo thing we're going to get into and also too. Go back and look at the movie Doom to try to understand how we are subjects of the government. There's one guy that has got this thing on his forehead, and they say it is the imperial conditioning that makes him loyal to the House of Atreides. And it was when the Harkonnens came and changed the imperial conditioning that the whole House of Atreides fell. But it's also showing that what is the word? Imperial conditioning. He was loyal to his king based on they conditioned his mind to always be loyal to them. And that's talking about black people as subjects. They breed you to be conditioned a certain way. A certain way. And that's also the movie. Go check that particular movie out also too. Again, just to show that in actuality that they're dealing with a whole form of mind control also too. Mind control also too. Going back about 17 years ago, you had your whole AIDS in Haiti. Now isn't it funny that this AIDS thing always show up in indigenous cultures that don't have these reprehensible sex acts, but yet tend to always come down with AIDS. And yet Europe, the home of all kind of foul and filth, never have the epidemics. But the key was to stop the whole voodoo energy from the 1980s, or to somehow make a test pattern that they can control people, including the reason why they don't let the certain amount of people in this country of the Haitians. Now they let the ones that is already indoctrinated, what we call educated, because they are British, they are French, mainly French and Catholic. And basically black, white people is just want to come and work and have 5 or 6, 7 jobs like in Jamaica. The thing is, it's always got to be somebody indoctrinated, but the people that they don't want to come over is the ones that is on the street is from poverty and is not educated or indoctrinated and can come over here, start listening to some rap or something, and say, hey, you know, these people here are all right. And the next thing you know, they're hooked up with the voodoo thing. This is the way they think. As well as they found a black girl from Haiti about 2 months ago, washed up on the shore. And they sent her back. Yet the whole Ilion bullshit went down. And like D. Gregory said, we want to know how a boy clings to an inner tube for 52 hours and don't fall asleep. Well, I can't do that shit now.
That's right.
You know, and I'm a grown man. How a baby not gonna fall asleep? You see. And they get him out of the water, and he looks just like they got him out of a Sunday school class.
I say.
So, we know that was all a part of the whole mind control shit too. You know, the whole part of the mind control and this whole thing that's going down. Some other stuff on the whole dark side thing, going with this particular voodoo energy and this stuff that we also dealing with. Number one, also, when we call the dark side, is nothing but the side that the physical, it is light that the physical eye cannot see. To break this thing down on a simpler part, the physical eye cannot see true light because it only can see holographic images, illusionary images. Based on this particular brain can only give a holographic image. Your whole Michael Talbot's holographic universe. So that means if it can't see the true light, then what would that true light be? It would register as the dark side with these physical eyes. So the dark side is the true light, or what we call the turned light. Here again, breaking down this particular stuff on a simplistic form also too. Now, if the light of this world is an illusion, then the dark side must be the true light. One of the keys. Now, in ancient Hemmitt, and in the books of Mahabharata, they also talk about the assembly of the gods. You see, ancient Hemmitt, you'll see these particular gods assembled amongst the wall. And what that is basically the different components of the melanin. The assembly of the gods is the same as the Akashic record and the melanin record. And when you see the great assembly hall, judgment hall. That's nothing but the inner chamber of the black man and black woman's mind, which will be the judgment that's also going down, going into more aspects of this particular research. Now, which leads us to this particular point, because also always documenting the whole dark side aspect as the archetypes of collective unconsciousness. The god of wisdom is the god Tahuti in Kemet, which later on translate Hermes in Greece, which is talking about the subconscious mind, which is now being identified James Hillman, as Hades. Hermes and Hades, which is supposed to be hell, which is narrowing this thing down, that the stuff that they want us to turn against is the ongoing pursuit of the melanin realm that they want us to turn against. So in James Hillman's information, in James Hillman, a white psychiatrist, a psychologist, he got several books out now, and clearly you can see that the books that he got out now, somebody stepped to his ass and put some foot up his behind and told him, don't you ever do no shit like that again. James Hillman's a white boy, wrote a book called Dreams in the Underworld. Dreams in the Underworld by James Hillman. You get your hands on it. And he proved that Hades and Hermes or Dionysus and all that stuff, and Dionysus is Osiris, or the hell realm is the same Christ level. He also proved that the Christ has to come from the underworld, or what you call hell, or it's not Christ. The whole concept of resurrection has to come from a fallen entity. It can't come from an entity that hasn't fallen. And when we talk about the ongoing pursuit of what this fall is, it's talking about a person falling in the physical body. So he put out the book Dreams in the Underworld, and his other new book, Soul Care, and a whole other books. Government must have stepped to him and said, don't you ever put out no shit like that again. But he also proves again that, but breaking this down, Hermes is the god Tahuti, and we're talking about a substance. Because Tahuti is the study of what? Alchemy, and alchemy is the study of melanin. So even Hades, or hell, is talking about melanin. We talked about this before. This is just more and more evident on the scientific aspect of this particular thing. These particular things that we deal with. So a group of people think this. Now we also know that what we're dealing with here, we set this all up for the whole Voudon war thing that we're gonna get into. Is that also we know if a group of people, just a small group of people, think the same things at one time, they can make some shit happen. So the concept here now is not to go and get a whole bunch of people to do nothing, but to deal with the aspect of the people that you get now that's with you. Now we also know that based on science and based on all ancient scriptures, that it will be just a few people that will understand what's going on in this particular day, because everybody else is just brain dead. Which also says if it's a few people, and we do have all these scriptures of some major thing happening, that means it is, we only need a few people to deal with this. And in so many words, we just talking about no more than 2 people at a damn time to change some shit. If not, you can't, because if you get 3 or 4, somebody in the group might not be on the same accord. Because it always boils down to 2 people. And that's what the science is on this particular thing. You see what I'm saying? You see, one thing we need these 1 or 2 people to understand is the focus on this shit being over. You see, which is the new reality. Going back over and over and stuff. Going back over some stuff, but I wanted to go through a couple other things. When the brain sees shadows, it is the light of the other world beyond the matrix. We see the light in this world is only an illusion because the brain is only designed to pick up illusions. So darkness is light. I just want to put this for the record in the camera. I just said it. Darkness is light, and the light in this world is only an illusion. The brain, the matrix. The pineal brain picks up the real light in this world what we call the shadow world. Going back to this particular stuff that we're going to deal with also, which is Voodoo thing also in a few minutes. We're going to get to this particular hard copy. Now, in the Hindu myth, which is this popularity book, there's one thing that is evident here. And we can trace this thing in all ancient cultures, and I think the white boy understands this. And that's why whenever you make a stand and you say that I'm protected by God, the white boy said we can go ahead and kill his ass. He don't know what time it is. Now, what are we talking about here? For the sake of argument, we talking about the God that we still worship he did one major act, and that was to create the known universe, or the physical universe, after the primal worlds, which was a whole other civilization that it lasted for billions of years, which we were a part of. So, this creator, primary job was to create the reality that we live in now, or the spark that gave to the reality that we live in now. Now, based on the Rig Veda, based on the Coffin text, based on the Rig Veda out of India, based on the Coffin text, which is older Typhonian information coming from ancient Hemmitt, and based on other world mythology, it says in this Rig Veda, or the Vedic material, that creator only lived about 1,000 years before he died. So in actuality, we be down here by our damn self the whole time. Now, this is this is some amazing shit, because obviously we bear witness. We call on things all day long and no shit get done. But it's only even in the basic laws, or even the books like Think and Grow Rich, where they're taking the basic laws of metaphysics and telling you that if you don't tap into your own subconscious mind, that it don't happen. And for the mere fact that a brother can be a crackhead and can go to church, and basically, because he's taught from a child to believe in Jesus strongly enough, he's only tapping into the subconscious portion of the mind that brings out their own healing and get him off of crack. And he attributes it to Jesus, because that's the only type of force that he knows based on what kind of knowledge. But in so many words, it ain't coming from God, because that particular God acted over creation, and that's already happened 13 billion years ago. So the white boy knows that if you line up behind God like most of us is doing, he can go and kill your ass, because he understands the laws of the universe. That God was the act of creation. Hell, we in deterioration now. So hell, even the laws that he set up is failing miserably. Even the seasons. So when you line up behind that, other than your fucking self, like even the Christ, the stuff that they copied and put into the New Testament tell you that greater works ye shall do. And if you don't focus on your own self, he can go ahead and take your ass on off the planet. And it's a thin line between you talking about you spiritual and you becoming and being God. You see what I'm saying? And most people still in the form of worship. You see what I'm saying? Still in the doggone form of worship. And we're not talking about that at this particular time, because it's funny how most of the worshiping people is dying like fucking flies. And that's because we don't understand the basic concept of spirituality. We're not talking about no atheism. We're talking about the basic bylaws of spirituality, that you got to be the conductor of this whole force. And if you don't understand that shit, no, he got the right to take you out and you be his subject for life, because you worshiping some shit out here that don't exist, but only through you. You see what I'm saying? Even the African myth says that down here, there was already another God. When they got down, when the true God got here, there was already another being. In your book, Marie Louise von Franz's book called Creation Myth, she deals with that, but she don't tell us what mythology it came from. So there's a book called Primal Myths by Barbara Sproul, S-P-R-O-U-L, And in there is coming from the Kenyan aspect of this subordinate deity being down here when the true gods got here. You see. Now, it's interesting because now they all talk about they're looking for the so-called quote-unquote leftover subjects from the Big Bang. So whether you deal with the Big Bang theory, that's the white man scientific way of talking about basically creation. He can have that, whatever, however the way the deal is and stuff. There could have very well been a projection of a Bang theory and all, but it's not beyond spiritual entities doing it. This whole carbon gas is bullshit. Well, what is a spiritual entity but the gas? Here's only if you know, but it's an intelligence. That's the difference between knowing how science on the African way and understanding the intelligence, then the white boy saying, no, this shit is just all gases and fumes and shit. You see what I'm saying? So they're saying that they're looking for the leftover substance or particles from the Big Bang. They call about the comets and all that kind of shit. But in actuality, what they're dealing with right now, when they come out with this particular information is, they're talking about those few people that are left, mainly black people, with the leftover substance from the Big Bang, and they're talking about an advanced strain of melanin. Because what is melanin but the leftover primordial substance of the primal worlds that existed before these worlds, called ash, carbonic ash. This ash is called, in the Sedation Hindus, is called Rasa, R-U-S-S-A. The Sedation is a group of Hindu people that talk about the Rasas, this particular ash. Now, going back to this science that I also tapped into, I think, the last couple times, no deep sleep, no melanin works. That's one of the keys now. That's one of the keys now. To heal yourself on a weekly basis, you got to have at least one good day where you take some type of substance that's going to sedate you. Now, whether it's going to be some...
Mother Earth.
Huh?
From Mother Earth.
What? Yeah, that's true. That's true, too. That good old...
Mother Earth.
You're talking for the man.
Yeah.
Huh? That good old sex. That sure does put a nigga under now. But whether you taking some type of substance with a chamomile, valerian root, or some damn sleeping pills like Salmonex or whatever, you need to be sedated at least one time a week for the melanin to actually, as well as we're talking about an intensified strain of the melanin working now in the 2000s where you can literally get some extra juice for these systems to come online. Now, let me give you an example. First of all, we used to use this stuff to heal ourselves with the deep sleep. Now, when, about a month ago, I started experimenting with this heavy at the beginning of the year, with the whole sleeping thing. I did it a couple of years back, but I started experimenting again heavy around February with the sleeping pills on basically the valerian root. Took about 4 of them. And I was waking up real refreshed and alert. Because remember now that it's not based on what kind of sleep, how much sleep you get. It's based on what kind of sleep you get. That's the difference. Because you can sleep a long period of time and wake up feeling bad. So we're talking about whether you go to that deep sleep after you Parnashad say, when you go to the deep sleep, you go to your higher self and you go into your own. So I decided that, I was doing this since February with this higher, going to this particular realm. And right around the summer solstice time, which is around the 21st, well, right a little bit before that, June 21st, but actually, we don't know when these damn dates are. You just know when it gets warm, that's the first summer solstice. You see. But right around the time when it got warm, been taking these things the whole time, but I started getting closer and closer and closer to this spiritual realm of going to the true self. And as a result, when I would take them, I would almost feel sick all day. Because what was happening is the body was literally healing itself, and it needed a day even in the sunlight to heal itself even greater. So that meant that the first part of the year, it was doing that. I would feel refreshed, and it was doing a certain part of healing itself. But when the energy got to a certain point, it was very strong. So therefore, what I was feeling, man, was a whole lot of healing going on. And as you know, any type of healing, you start to feel bad because it's purifying the body. And in so many words, what was actually happening was I was raising pure Kundalini energy. And anytime you raise the Kundalini or the serpentine fire at the base of the spine, it starts purifying the body. And therefore, you have these toxins being burned up. So what used to be at the beginning of the year, a refreshed day, one of those days was a day where as I had to drink a whole lot of water and stuff and try to get through it, this bad feeling. You see what I'm saying? Also too. But this is needed also at this particular time to bring certain latent powers online. Let me give you some examples. There's some stuff that is in the sexual region of the root chakra, right at the base of the spine, which would be down there between the anus and the scrotum, or the anus and the vagina, or whatever, it's based on who are you. These certain latent energies, it's just like if you got down herbs and you put it in a jar, you know the deposit at the bottom is going to be the most concentrated part of this shit. Well, these latent powers of these energies are so latent and so dormant until the only way to bring them up is through sexual activity and deep aspects of lust. They're called ojas, shaktas, and kami. These particular latent forces is literally the power that you need to become God. But it has to come through a deep form of lust. And this is key here because all your major religions tell you that's wrong. But then again, we understand that the people, when we say religions, because we didn't have that before 2,000 years ago, we had educational systems of spirituality. These religions tell you that lust is wrong, but we know lust is a primal force. That's why Crowley, in the Book of Thoth and couple things, one of the tarot cards that he reactivated, he talks about lust. Now, what is this primal force? It's a primal force to drive your ass to have children when you don't want them. Both male and female. Drive you crazy. Have you walk in the street at night looking for someone, whether you male or female, or whether you looking for a man or a woman. We're talking about a primal force that over the course of years gained a taboo based on male dominance and the hatred of a woman, and what this particular woman either did one thing, made that male feel, and also by being a xenophobic culture of the hatred, they said it's got to be evil, as well as the mass homosexual population around Rome. You see what I'm saying? At that particular time, which led at the time when the Christian mythology was being drafted into literal history and moralism. You see what I'm saying? So obviously we're talking about something that is the key to raising up. Now, what I'm saying here is These latent forces, they can only come up through a type of force that is so innate that even your thought can't bring it up. It has to be something, but your thought is all, that's all connected with the brain, but it has to be something that is erotic. You see what I'm saying?
Okay.
These primal forces. So I did an experiment. The experiment was to get very extremely horny and then go meditate. Well, you can do that through sexual tantra, just don't ejaculate. And then go meditate. This time I focused on the lust aspect. But the meditation wasn't enough. That was just to get the certain Kundalini energy in a certain flow. That you just raise the stuff by taking, imagining the fire shooting up your spine. And just to get the flow going. The key was to immediately go into a deep sleep by having some type of sedation to kick in. And when I did that and went into this particular deep sleep, I woke up in my body, I raised this particular Kundalini energy greater than I've ever raised it over the past 7 years. And as a result, my energies became strong enough that the mental telepathy, you see what I'm saying, could affect things around me and people around me. And that's one of the keys of this particular forces. And also that's why, you get this book, Modern Sex Magic, Secrets of Erotic Spirituality by Donald Michael Craig. Donald Michael Craig's book, Modern Sex Magic, Secrets of Erotic Spirituality. Donald Michael Craig, K-R-A-I-G. Which, as well as the book, Dr. John Mumford's book I've been talking about for years, Ecstasy Through Tantra. There's several ones out. There's tons of whole types of books and all. But I want to get basic that this one would be better because most of the tantra stuff is more of a natural way of doing it, but it doesn't go through the erotic aspect as sex magic does, which is a science. See, so I would say this. But now what we're doing is now we are literally honing in down to the wire on aspects and things that we can actually use. It's stuff that we can use that cuts to the chase. It cuts to the chase. Cuts to the chase. And so we'll go back into some stuff also too in a few minutes. Now going back to this whole minstrel thing, I mentioned that the last time in the Dark Moon Mysteries book, but also because one sister raised the question, well, if you saying the minstrel is also good, why do I have to bleed? And the problem here is one of the actual ancient science to why this whole thing occurred has been lost. And basically, it was a form of birth control, and we had the woman had the science to bring the period on at will. Not just wait till the end of the month or whatever, or time, but to bring it on at will as a form of birth control. Or, not only bring it on at will, but bring it on at will as a certain amount of elixir that she could use for various magical purposes. And that, the sky's the limit on that particular part. Is that particular part. Now, we're still talking about developing a deep level of hatred for the world around you to bring on a new reality. This is the only thing that separates you from the zombieism and the physical terrain of everybody that's walking around like zombies. A deep hatred for the world around you. What we're talking about here is, and God knows that's been a struggle for a lot of people who know what time it is, the last couple of years. What we're talking about here is us literally putting the power back in our hands, but not waiting for some shit to go down when it's supposed to be going down with us. So the people I'm talking about, you know what time it is going on. The ones, like I said, you don't need but a few people. In the Dogon mythology, they talk about Sirius A, Sirius B, and Sirius C. We know that Sirius C represents a world that is coming, because it is the star of the woman. But it is also talking about representing the resurgence of the goddess or the great mother's realm or the feminine realm, which is also called the second Aru or the paradise in ancient Kemet of the Sekhmet's realm. So the god Imenja in Yoruba is called Imiya in Dogon, which is Sirius C. And in so many words, what this thing is talking about, it's all called Maya in Kemet, the final resting place for humanity, are the great works, are the Christ, or in Kabbalah it's called the Shekinah. This Sirius C, as well as the Sirius D, we're talking about another reality that we're dealing with. This is just another name that the Dogon talk about, the Imiya, or what the Christians call it hereafter. These are states of being that later on was broken down in just objects of worship, but they have greater meanings to it, which would be the final solution of the reality of where we are going. You see what I'm saying? Of where we are also going. That particular resting place, but also known as Eminya also. The word Sama, which we talked about in the Rig Veda, is also called crushed death. Going back to this particular science, so we got to know this death realm. Crushed death, which is talking about death. When we talk about this, is still talking about those primal worlds that existed long before this particular known universe existed. Let me go into a couple other things and I'll go into a couple other things I want to get into right now. Y'all all right? Mm-hmm. Okay. Number one, going back to this particular sexual energy, especially it is pertinent that the female understands that her power lies within the sexual aspect of her physiological and spiritual nature and her own sexual being, which over the course of the last 5,000 years has been turned around backwards to make her ashamed of the sexuality so that she couldn't take it to the maximum of what is supposed to happen. And it shuts her down. In this way, it keeps this particular plane of existence and this particular pain and suffering in place. Now, let me give you an example. Now, just think about this for a minute. It is more feasible for a woman to have multiple partners than a man. Yet it is more acceptable in this society for a man to have multiple partners. Even if it's not a harem thing in this society, it's still a certain admiration for the James Bond type figure to have multiple women. Whereas it is almost an oxymoron, ludicrous, and asinine to even think about it, because we, on the physiological capabilities, was inferior. That you shoot your wad, that's it. And how many women in one night can a man physically satisfy? To be honest, if you get past the mythology of it. Whereas the woman, that's her realm. No problem. So obviously, this ancient primordial realm that existed thousands of years ago, where the woman had multiple partners, it makes common sense. It's just reversed, based on the patriarchal view of things. You see, some things are physically impossible, but yet it's turned around, you see what I'm saying, to say the other. It's the same thing when it comes to the white boy. Half the shit is physically impossible of his superiority. But even by definition and thought, we think of him as the ruler of the world. So obviously we're talking about a state of mind and an indoctrination. Same thing when it comes to the power of the woman. And we talk about ultimately the black woman. Certain things just make common sense. You see. But if she physically is capable of doing this with multiple partners, it means that in actuality, that's what she's supposed to have for a greater potential. That's what she's supposed to have for a greater potential. The great mother sexual energy must flow, and how it flows, and when it flows, it will destroy this particular patriarchal slavery. And one of the main keys of doing this is you got to get rid of this guilt complex that is psychologically implanted in you, that something is wrong with that. You see what I'm saying? First of all, can't be allowed in this society because most men can't deal with the shit. You see what I'm saying? Can't deal with the shit. You know, you shoot. Just a thought. But psychologically and subconsciously, most men like the slutty side. They don't like that. It might not end up that way for their wife. But the only friend they ever have will be the slut. You know? Will be the slut. You see, the only friend they'll ever have will be the doggone slut. You see what I'm saying? Which goes to the science of, the Moorish science of Lancelot and Guinevere. If anybody ever seen this movie Excalibur, I'll give you an example of that stuff. Guinevere is married to King Arthur. She's married to the noble king, but the story goes that the great trusted knight, Lancelot, falls in love with her. And this great betrayal of King Arthur from the most noble knight. Well, there's other stories where he goes and he sleeps with King Arthur's wife. He sleeps with King Arthur's wife. This is a book called Lancelot and the Grail. And to give you another example of this thing, what goes on here. Lancelot and the Grail seems to represent the opposite poles. A hero whose love for Arthur's queen, or his wife, inspires him to become the greatest of the knights. And the holy vessel, which is the Grail, which is like the Christos of one person's illumination into the divine. Now, Number one, why does the story go in his most trusted night, you'll see it in the movie First Night, or the movie Excalibur, which is a greater representation of it. Why does the story go, why does Guinevere betray her beloved King Arthur? Number one, it goes to show the superiority of the feminine energy where the male can never dominate it. And when it dominates it, ultimately it finds its way to free itself. So the whole concept of Guinevere having infidelity with the trusted knight, you see what I'm saying, is a concept of the power of the feminine energy. Now let's look at this. Number one, this is the greatest knight ever, Lancelot. Not only does she betray one of the greatest kings ever. Now you know this is all Moorish science brought from ancient Hemmitt, brought to Spain and Scotland and France, later on conquered by England, and England takes the story and makes Camelot Britain. But it's also talking about not only a basic theme of